Welcome to Your Two Cents, the podcast. I'm Alicia Mccarvell.
And I'm Sylvia Beirnes. Your Two Cents, the podcast is proudly made with credit unions because they're just as obsessed with talking about money as we are.
Weddings can be so expensive. I shouldn't even say can be. Most of them are. And we typically only talk about how expensive it is for the bride and groom, when realistically, your guests are paying money, your bridesmaids, your groomsmen are paying money. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
We're super excited. We're having a conversation that is so rarely had, and it is, what is the cost of weddings to the people that you love who you've invited into your circle? And I'm telling you, it's a super fun conversation.
Okay, so we've got a bride-to-be, a bridesmaid, and wedding attendant. We've got a bride celebrating 15 years of marriage and a wedding planner. And they're all gonna kind of break down their own experiences and how they value weddings, the cost, and what they think is important and what we think is important.
No, it's a really fun conversation, so we can't wait for you to listen. And this is Your Two Cents, the podcast, proudly made by Bicoastal in partnership with credit unions. I'm so excited to have this conversation today because I love love, but we always hear about people talking about how much weddings cost them, but not everybody else.
And while we love love, we do know that our budget might not love it. So in the height of a wedding season, you've got things like bachelorettes, you've got engagement parties, you've got bridal showers, you've got, if you're in the party, you've got dresses, makeup. There's so much that goes along with it. So we're gonna ask some fun questions today, get everybody's opinion on it, and really kind of have a conversation that I don't think we've had about weddings and what goes on behind the scenes from different parts of the wedding. So we've got Carla, who is a seasoned wedding goer. And also a bridal party member, has been a bridal party member. We've got Felicity, who is a wedding planner. So I'm gonna shed some light on some conversations that happen behind closed doors. We have got Samantha, who is our bride-to-be, which is so exciting. And Nicole, who is celebrating 15 years married. Yeah, yes. So we're gonna have a fun conversation about weddings and everything in between.
Yeah. So thank you all for being here. There are no wrong answers here. We genuinely want to know what your each individual opinions are. So we're just gonna get right into it.
Ooh. We want to know, what do you think people are spending on their wedding in 2024? Carla, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, so there's no wrong answer.
No wrong answer.
Hearing is what I'm to understand. I've been to a lot of weddings, so I'd like to think that I've seen the spectrum. In this economy, I don't think anyone's getting away with less than like 30 grand in the tens of thousands. Even a backyard wedding at this point, when you think about all the costs incurred.
Yeah.
And then obviously upwards from there, unlimited. But my guess on average, I would say between 50 and 100,000 if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I would say you're pretty bang on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Felicity like, I have the answers to this test question.
This is the rest. Does this play about us? No, the weddings I plan have been upwards of $40,000. Currently, I'm planning one that's $100K, and it's so easy to get that far because, just a clear top tent, like a bougie tent, is 10 grand. Mm-hmm. A wedding dress could be upwards of $1,000 to $10,000 or more. And then you've got your venues these days that just they get their money from food and beverage. Mm-hmm. So food and beverage could be $100+ plus tax plus gratuity. So you're spending $20,000 just to feed people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's up there.
So, Samantha, you're our bride to be.
Yes.
Do you have a budget?
I do have a budget, and Carla was actually spot on. Just in the midst of wedding planning, I was trying to be budget friendly, and I was trying to save money, as most people want to.
Yeah.
And it was super, super hard to get anything below, I'd say at least 25,000, because food, you do need to spend a minimum of 3,000 to 6,000. If you want to rent anything from wedding event stores, which I never took into account that's a thing.
Yeah.
It gets very, very costly when you start adding things up.
So do you think you're going to be able to stick to budget, or you're going to add up
I'm
over?
going to try my best to stick to budget, just because, again, in this economy, I do want to save and invest in other things. So,
Did you have a budget for your wedding?
We did.
Yeah. Did you stick to it, or did you
We stuck to it. We were
Nice.
poor.
Yeah.
Very poor.
Yes.
And we had a budget, and we honestly stuck to our budget because there was no other option.
Yeah.
And ours was $10,000, but that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And we didn't have a formal sit-down dinner.
Yeah.
We had an evening cocktail, champagne oysters, 7 o'clock start.
Yeah.
There was no sitting down and going through. Basically, we saved 4 hours of time.
Yeah.
Time and money.
Yeah, well, exactly. And like, I got married 12 years ago, so it was still less expensive than it is today. But we tried to find as many things as we could. And it's actually how I fell in love with budgeting in the first place, because I was like, okay, I want the wedding that I want, but I also don't want to go into debt for this wedding. And so we got married at the Maritime Museum of the Atlantic on the waterfront. It was $1,000 because it's provincially owned, and so they aren't gonna, jack up the price there. Obviously, food and beverage was for sure a cost there, but we could bring in our own alcohol.
Yeah.
My dad played in a band. They came in, they were our wedding entertainment. So we found a lot of ways to make it really special, but we were able to cut down some of those costs. I still don't think if I wanted that wedding to this day that I would be getting away with it for way less than we did. But I tried to find like every avenue that I could to have, like, I called it bougie on a budget. I was like, this is gonna be like, I don't want anyone thinking that it's less than what I wanted it to be. Right. But ultimately, like, when people look back, it's like, they had fun and they were happy for us, and that was really the most important thing. Yeah. But I was obviously stressing over every little detail and every line item to make sure it was awesome, but also fit our budget at the end of the day. Yeah. But now I'm obsessed with budgets and spreadsheets, and so I thought it was a good kickoff into my relationship.
Definitely.
But we did stick to it, and we were very happy that we did. We definitely we had some help from our family, which we weren't expecting. Like, we were expecting to carry the whole thing, and we wanted to go into it that way. Like, we weren't getting married so that we could lean on other people, but they generously did offer that, so it was not without help, but it wasn't like someone was just like, go spend whatever you would like. Like, there were still parameters around the help that we got. What about you?
Yeah, mine was 8 years ago. It was that not a great at math. 2016. So we didn't really have a budget because we didn't have a lot of money. Like, it wasn't like I was like, here's X amount of dollars we can afford to spend on a wedding. I was like, what we get is what we can afford is what we get, like, essentially. And we planned our wedding in 8 weeks, which made a very big difference. And I'm sure we'll tap into this. The longer you have to spend money, the more money you'll spend. And so 8 weeks was like pretty easy to be like clear and concise with what we wanted, but also to be like, I don't have time for anybody else's opinions on what my wedding is either, because I can't afford to invite your friends. Right. I can't afford to have other people there. This is what we're doing. So I think, our total wedding was between $4,400 and $4,700, and that included my dress. But like, that was it. I had to buy off the rack. I had to buy off on sale. So, I mean, if we did it again and renewed our vows, am I going to stick to $4,700? Probably not. There are things. There are things that I think I missed out on that I would have liked to have had then, but it was more important to me then that I had a good time and that I got married. Like, that was just kind of what we were looking forward to. So I know we'll touch on that, but I didn't really have a budget. If I had a budget this time, I don't stick to any budget. So I don't think it would be.
So the part of this conversation that Alicia and I have been really excited to talk about is, what did it cost you to go to other people's weddings? So I'm sure you've all had experience in this department as well too, but I think when we talk about weddings, we just forget that it also costs other people money, whether it's just attending or it's actually being in a bridal party. When we got married, almost every single person that we loved didn't live here. It's where we lived, and they had said that they wanted to come, but we knew that there was an expense to just getting to our wedding that was very real for everybody. So I'm sure my guests have a very strong opinion on my wedding, but I'm just curious to hear what you think. Do you want to start, Nicole?
Sure. It's been a range. From attending a wedding, flying to a wedding, being in a wedding that you had to fly to. There's just so many expenses depending on where you're going. And then there's the topic of whether the bride and groom are paying for your dress and hair and makeup, which we did actually for our bridal party, because we felt that it would take some of the burden off. But if you're paying for flights and dresses and makeup and hair and accommodation and all those things, like, I know that we've paid anywhere between, like, plus the gift, anywhere between, $300 and $2,000, honestly, to be in a wedding.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else have thoughts on this one? Carla, as a wedding guest, as a seasoned wedding guest, we've dubbed you this honor.
I would say the same around, like, you know, you're not getting away with less than $300 because the gift alone, and I'm a cash giver because that's what I would want.
Totally.
And just even if you're not in the party, I'm still probably going to buy a new dress, probably going to, you know, spend money here and there. So I think accommodations is a big one though. Depending on where the wedding is, like I'm going to a wedding this fall and there is nowhere else you can stay other than the resort where the wedding's being held, which is a really luxurious, beautiful resort, but of course that comes at a cost. So if you want to go to the wedding, well, you have to stay there, and it's quite pricey. So I know that this is a wedding, my cousin's wedding, so I know that there are some people in the family who would love to go, but it's not in the budget for them. So, you know, just there are times when you don't even have the option to try to find a cheaper accommodation because it's not even possible. So it's a range, but definitely can get pricey quick. It adds up.
Anybody else?
I'd say like 500 plus, like easy, because like you want to buy a new outfit, and then like well, what if you want to get your roots done or like your nails, and then your gift, because like if you're a gift giver or a cash giver, even like that's your love language kind of thing, like that's what you do, and then accommodations, like just like for me traveling as a vendor to go to a wedding, like I charge like $950 just to like get there, because I'm there the day before for the rehearsal, and then I'm there for like the day of the wedding, so it's 2 nights accommodation at like easily on average $250 plus tax, plus your parking, plus your meals. It adds up. So yeah, like I would say like up to $1,000 for me personally that I've spent going to a wedding.
You touch on such a good point. Like there's all kinds of little costs that creep up. Like, oh, I'm gonna get my nails done. I'm gonna get my hair done.
Yeah.
It's not your wedding.
New shoes.
It's so cute. So you're like,
It's
I'm
the
gonna
first
do-
time you're seeing family sometimes that you haven't seen in a while,
like a
or friends,
reunion.
especially if it's like someone from high school or friends you haven't seen in a little while. So like,
You end up on like someone's mantle in a photograph.
Oh, that's
You're like, I can't have my nails.
That is something
amazing.
that I would totally think that you would think about. I have never thought of that. That's so
Not
funny.
missing any.
It can happen, and it's not that we should be implying that people need to go and spend all this money, but really, like as a guest, it's like you're also feeling like, I do anyway, that you're honoring that person and like showing up in the way that like celebrates them the way that they're celebrating themselves. And so there's something about that. Like we've all kind of agreed to this unwritten rule of like, we're not just gonna show up in like my tracksuit.
They've got like dress codes now. at weddings.
I know, I was going to touch on that too. At Your 2 Cents, we obviously love talking about money. The credit unions do too. There are many things to love about credit unions, but the one most amazing thing is that they love treating their members as people. They know that your finances aren't the same as anyone else's, so they've got banking solutions that are as unique as you are. Credit unions are the proud sponsors of Your 2 Cents, the podcast. Who's been in a wedding? Who's stood in a wedding before? Okay, me too. Let's talk about that cost of that specifically.
Yeah.
And like what you're essentially responsible to being a part of: a bachelorette, the showers, the engagement parties, if those things are on the table. What do we think the average cost of that is? Yeah, I know.
Yikes.
I know. I feel like truly this does depend on the bride and the groom.
Yeah.
Like I've been in weddings that have cost me less, and I've been in weddings that have cost me more. But like, again, if going to being a guest is starting at $500, like I think being a part of a wedding party is starting at $1,000. Like realistically.
Easy.
Because bachelor and bachelorette parties now, not to age myself, but when I was younger and I used to hear about these, I always thought it was like a one-night thing. You go out for a night with your friends, and now it's like
a weekend
oh, no,
away.
We're taking 2 flights.
Yeah.
Not even one.
Actually, you're gonna need 6 bathing suits.
You're gonna need to take 4 vacation days.
Yeah.
That's true too.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
costing me something.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be, the bachelorette alone. I was on one recently that probably cost, I didn't do the math afterwards because I don't want to know, but I'm upwards of $2,500.
Yeah.
Easy.
So that, and then the dress.
Yeah.
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 Hair and makeup.
You're looking at,
Buying snacks for the weekend. You're buying like props and stuff for bachelorettes.
Yeah.
Do you think that the costs are upfront? Like, do you think that it's transparent when you agree to a wedding what it's going to cost?
100%
Yeah.
no. It's like, do you want to be at my wedding? But you're not telling me that I have to fly there twice because I have to go there for your bachelorette and then another time for your wedding. And that I'm going to have to buy a certain outfit, a certain dress
that I hate.
that I'm not going to wear again. Let's be realistic. We are never wearing that again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to cut it short, and that's not happening. I would say, yeah, it's you have an idea, but you're not told in advance. It's, you want to be at my wedding, you get overwhelmed and happy with the feeling of, oh, yay, I'm special, they want me to be in their wedding. And then you're thinking, oh, okay, well, there's 2 flights, there's a gift, there's a dress, there's hair. Oh, and then there's my husband who has to come too. So all the flights for him and all the things for him. So I think that even a bride and groom might not know how much it is going to cost their bridal party up front. I think they just get so lost in the excitement, the romance of it all, and they're excited, and then you want everyone to be happy and having a great time. But I think that would be a really great thing to know up front.
Yeah, I've seen brides on TikTok. We even like create like PowerPoint presentations for like their bridesmaids to be like, oh, like, do you want to commit? Here's like what I'm expecting, kind of thing.
Oh wow!
Like the Type A brides do that.
Everybody
does
I
that.
love this because I mean I'm
Yeah.
Type A for sure, but it didn't cross my mind when I asked my bridal party, and it, not to age myself, but like we did do an overnight thing, and it was local, and it was so great, and it was, you know, small and wonderful and exactly what I wanted. But then a lot of my friends got married quite a bit after me, and that went from that to like exponentially larger, and it was flights and it was all these things. And I wouldn't have changed it, but I do think that when you're asking people to spend money and you haven't set the expectation of like, what do you actually want? How do we start those conversations? Because it's sort of, it definitely takes up the romanticism of going, want to be my wedding? It's gonna cost you this much money. Like that's a terrible way to enter into like what is such a beautiful thing, because you're asking people that you love. But I think in the same way that you would talk to your partner about money, like don't we love the people enough to say, this is what I want? What's on the onus of the bride and groom to put forward to make sure that the people that they're asking such a big favor of, or big financial ask of, it's not a favor, to like what they're signing up for? You're a bride-to-be. How do you feel about this?
Yeah. So my thought process is on the other spectrum, just in my like personal experience. So like my love language is gift giving. So when I did the bridesmaid proposal, and you probably see online, a lot of brides are proposing to their bridesmaids with gifts and other sorts of things. So that was the first thing I did, which again was out of my pocket, and I wanted to because I love my girls. And then also, I'm young and they're young, and we're just getting our footing in life, and that's something we're all very transparent about. So I think my situation is a little bit different, because I did feel as though I knew it was going to cost them and they knew it was going to cost them, so I wanted to make everything as cheap as possible. I was very transparent about wanting my bachelorette super small, local. They didn't even have to spend anything if they didn't want to. Like, it could be a dinner out. I didn't really care. And that's kind of same for like my wedding. It's nothing extravagant or anything. And when I first got engaged, my wedding plans were to go abroad. And I did, do invites, and I spent my own money and planned, and it was official. And then I started thinking about family members and friends who weren't able to make it, and then I put myself in their shoes, and I just was like, you know what, I know I'm basically getting married for other people to celebrate me, because if it was up to me and without my family and my fiance's family, we would be eloping for sure. But I just also didn't want to miss the milestone and stuff like that. But I do know it's very costly to be a part of a wedding. And hopefully more people in this generation do take that into account for their bridal party, so it won't be as costly.
Do you think, we asked this question last time, do you think you'd feel comfortable saying no if you couldn't financially be a part of a wedding?
I would. It might stir some things, like you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but yeah, that's like a touchy thing. I don't think I would be comfortable saying no, and also being a bride, I think I'd be hurt, but I would understand. But there definitely would be some sadness there.
I don't think I'd feel comfortable doing it either. But we talked about this being like, if you really want those people in your wedding, you would think that as a bride, you'd be like, okay, well, what can I do?
Yeah, exactly.
What can we do to figure it out for you to be a part of it? But I definitely think that transparency is not really there. And I like what you're saying, that you put yourself in other people's shoes, because like very much for me at the time, I couldn't afford anything. So why I would assume that anybody else in my wedding could afford anything would be silly for me, because I couldn't afford it. So it was very much, here's my color scheme, buy the dress you can afford.
Yeah.
Here's what color I want your shoes, don't care what they look like.
That's exactly what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
and it was very much that, because I was going to put on a dress that cost the amount of money that I, could afford at the time. My shoes were going to be what they were because that's all I could afford. I don't think I'd feel comfortable saying no either.
I backed out of a bachelorette before.
Did you?
Yeah, like as a friend. I wasn't in the wedding party, but I was invited to this bachelorette. There was like 20 girls, and like to me, like that's just insane having 20 people. But I understood when I do it, so I could split the cost amongst everyone. And I was like, all right, we're going on this yacht, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're going like, I don't know, like pole dancing, aerial, whatever. And I was like, it's not my thing. Plus, I can't really afford that. I love you. I'm also planning my wedding. I just can't afford it. So I just didn't go to the bachelorette. And like, we're friends. We love each other. But like, I think that it was a mutual agreement. Like, she was also planning her wedding. She was kind of poor too. She probably couldn't afford her bachelorette if it wasn't for all the friends that were going to split the cost. So it was one of those things. It was kind of like awkward. But I was honest. I'm like, I can't afford that. Sorry.
That's why we're having this conversation, because money is awkward.
It is
Like,
awkward. And it's putting shame on your shoulders too, because you're going, well, I wish I could do those things. And then all of a sudden you feel terrible. And there's nothing to be ashamed about, especially like depending on, I mean, I was a lot younger too. I was really early on in my career when we got married. And so people were just getting started. It wasn't the same as you're older and maybe you have more disposable income and you can change things. Like it was what it was. But for someone to have to say that to me, I would have been sad. And then I would have felt bad. And then as if it was me on the other end, I would have felt super embarrassed. Like and there's nothing to be embarrassed about, but we haven't normalized that conversation. I'm curious though, being a wedding planner, I'm just getting into the tea now. Like when someone does that, do you hear your brides, like if you've had a bride come to you, or have you heard through working with them someone's reaction to someone needing to back out of something because they can't commit to the whole thing? You don't have to like name names, but I'm just curious.
I have had a few brides actually say like, oh, my bridesmaid, can't do it, or I'm looking for a replacement maid of honor, or I'm looking for this, that. And it isn't because of any animosity. It's just because of like the time commitment for one, plus the financial commitment. And I'm just like, from my point of view, I kind of like give them the perspective, like, because like you don't know what you don't know. You've never planned a wedding before, you don't know. So I just tell them like, you don't need to find a replacement bridesmaid. You don't need to find a replacement maid of honor. Like if this person can't afford it, then you're just one person down. But I feel like a lot of people get hung up on like, oh, well, I need even bridesmaids and even groomsmen and this and that. And it just doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. But I just find like it does hurt their feelings a little bit. The main thing though is like when their family, their guests, or their bridesmaids don't give them a card at their wedding. That's the thing. It's not necessarily about backing out. It's they've already spent so much money, and then I've had brides being like, I didn't even get a card from my maid of honor. It's like, neither did I. You know what I mean? Like it's very normal.
I don't think I've ever given a card to any of the brides of weddings that I've been in. Like I'm very much like, I've spent so much money. I was not thinking about a card for you in this moment. The last thing I was thinking about was a card.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Sorry to everybody's wedding who I've been in and I've not got you a card. I think I've been a guest to a wedding and forgotten a card. Oh no.
It does happen, and I think ultimately, and I actually thought this was maybe where you were going, and maybe this is a terrible thing to think, but it's like, if you're looking for replacements for the most important people in your lives, why aren't you reframing the activity around what you're doing?
Exactly.
Because I really think when I look back at my wedding, and I think back to, people did travel, as I mentioned, I would have moved mountains to make sure that the people who were there could still have been there no matter 100%. What. And that's what matters to me. I look back and I think like, I look at the memories. All I wanted to do at my wedding, like the one thing other than get married, obviously, I was like, we had been given like a nice bottle of champagne as an engagement gift. I was like, I want a picture of my husband and I on the dance floor drinking out of the bottle. Like I don't want glasses. I just want to be having that much fun that like this bottle of champagne is getting popped. And I got that picture, and I'm telling you, it's still one of my favorite pictures that we have, because the memory was just like, you're surrounded by your people, you're having fun. Why can't you do that in a way that is affordable for other people? So when I hear like replacement maid of honor, I'm like, what? That's your best friend.
And I also, I think it's like, obviously it's easy for me to see now that I'm not planning a wedding, or now that I'm married, but I definitely think it's touchy, because you've been thinking about your wedding your whole life. It is a very like personal thing. You're already having to make adjustments because you're now with a partner who has their wedding that they've been planning in their head of what's important to them, and then to have people who are important to you not be able to afford the things that are also important to you. It's like a very unique way of having to like accommodate, but also be understanding. And like, I can see why in the moment that would be tough to swallow and also tough to deliver, because I know this is important to you, but I can't be putting myself into financial debt to be a part of this, but I want to be. So I think that collaboration is like obviously very important, but I think it's easier to see when you're on the other side of it, to being like, I would have done this, but it's like in that moment you're still allowed to feel hurt and upset and disappointed. But yeah, it is really
hard.
Yeah.
You had the answers of like a dream bride. I'm like, oh, everyone needs to go to the Samantha finishing school of how to be a bride. Like, let's talk about it. But I do think that we have expectations that are so high now because of social media, and people are posting all the things, and everyone's getting like the matching outfits and the bathing suits and the boats and all this stuff. And when you're saying that there's 20 people, it's a lot. What do you wish you could walk into sort of in those situations to say, this is my dream scenario as a guest or like a bridal party that you wish you could openly share? If there were no hurt feelings, if there was no like strings attached, what would be the thing you'd want to share to make sure that that ask is one that works both ways?
How much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
You know, what you're imagining, how much is, I think up front, and I'm the maid of honor for my cousin's wedding, which is upcoming this fall. And in terms of planning her bachelorette party, she asked everyone up front, are you interested in doing this, yes or no, just to gauge interest before even saying, you know, this is what it will cost, and I need to see that there's enough people interested. If there's not, we'll do something much cheaper. It was a trip to Nashville, by the way, which we ended up doing. It was amazing. It was so much fun. But what was great about that is everyone had the opportunity to be like, you know what, I'm not interested, and there were no hard feelings. And then the people who ended up going, they were the ones who could afford it and who didn't feel pressured to be there. So I think that was a nice way of doing it, just asking who's interested, and if not, let's do something else, rather than here's what we're doing, and if you can't afford it, then resentment.
I do think though, like that the mindset of like, here's what we're doing is okay, but you can't expect everybody. Like, I feel like that attitude of this is what I want, this is what I've dreamed of, if you can't afford it, that's okay.
Exactly.
Like coming with that mindset, but I don't think that's always the case.
Well, and it's a unique position being the maid of honor, because you kind of get to hear both sides. Like, you hear the bride kind of being like, well, I understand completely if people can't make it, but then when someone says to you as the maid of honor, or, you know, I'm not able to make it, I'm so sorry, financial issues, and you relay that to the bride, and they're like, well, that's one of my best friends. You know? So you're kind of hearing both. And it's like, I can understand the disappointment, but also I can understand being in a position where you can't afford it. So I think it is, how do you, as a bride, truly balance your disappointment with an understanding and not making a person feel guilty or shame because of that?
It's such a hard topic, because after we got married, and because in my husband's circle of friends, we were like the last people to get married, but then in my circle of friends, we were the first people to get married. So it was really interesting being on both sides of it. And I feel lucky because I had been married first, that I had more understanding. When I hear people getting engaged now, I'm like, congratulations, you don't need to invite me to anything. Because I come from a place of like, I know how much everything costs, I know too much. I will not be offended. I will send you a card, I will do all the things, but like, I also want you to know that there's no pressure on the other side, because also like just the number of people, when we're talking about food and beverage and all these things, the cost per person to go to a wedding to the couple is a lot. So I always just try and give them an out, like, I'll go if you want me to go, I would love to, but also that pressure of like, I need to have 300 people at my wedding because I have a small family, my husband has a huge family, like what is the expectation there? I had a really close friend get married a couple weekends ago. It was just her family, and she sent me a link to the pictures, and I was like overjoyed for her, and I was like, she was in my wedding party, and I for a second wasn't like, oh my God, I wasn't even invited to your wedding. What is this? I was like, good for you. You did the thing that made sense for you at this moment of life. And I just think we need to like really try to like take the personal out of it. But like, how does that feel? Sitting as a bride, like hearing all of that, like how would you, I don't know, and I don't mean to put you on the spot with that question.
No, not at all. It's so funny you say that, because the reason, like I said, if it was up to me and my partner, we would be eloping. And it's because of external influences and stuff like that we did decide to have a wedding. We aren't doing a traditional ceremony. We are going to the Justice of Peace, because I couldn't fathom spending the money for like a 15-minute ceremony. And also, people, unfortunately, do get hurt on what they're invited to. So, if some people are invited to the ceremony, it was just gonna cause some conflict. So I went the easy route and I was like, justice of peace, then reception. But that is like a huge factor in my situation is, upsetting people. I wish I could have done that, but I was like too nervous, too scared to upset anyone closest to me. And I know that sounds silly because people close to you obviously want what's best, but it's just a touchy topic. And again, people do dream about their wedding since they're young, and your friends dream about your wedding also, and your family and your parents. And then I also had an aspect of, what if I do this? What if I do go elope without my parents, who I'm very close to, and I regret it? So I just was like, I need to balance out here, but I'm happy your friend did that, because that's like really nice, and that's like kind of like cutting down like a boundary, especially in today's age, because weddings are so big and extravagant now. So yeah.
When Scott and I were deciding to get married, we could either afford a ring or a wedding. So we just decided to do the wedding. So it was really important to us that not only was it budget friendly for us, but we were also very aware that it needed to be budget friendly for other people too.
Absolutely. When we got married, we're both from different places. So every single person who was coming to our wedding basically had to travel, and we were super, super aware of that. So it just made me budget conscious all around.
We love that our guests on this episode do such a great job of speaking up in terms of costs and teaching us a little bit about that transparency, and just maybe not to like sweat every little detail.
Absolutely. Or that feeling of FOMO that you have because you're a guest and you have to say no to something that you just can't afford.
Yeah, this is a juicy topic, so make sure that you tune in to episode 2.
Absolutely. It is full of hot tea.
Yeah. This is Your 2 Cents, the podcast.
Proudly made by iHeart Radio, by Coastal, and in partnership with credit unions.